Today I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about why I stopped chasing the perfect yarn. And this little reflection is something that's been brewing in the back of my mind for quite a long time. And I thought it would be helpful for those of you who are on your spinning journey, trying to figure out where your yarn and your making and your journey around spinning yarn sort of fits into the broader context. I wanted to normalize a few things as well and sort of acknowledge that some of these things are just part of the hand spinner's journey. So early in my spinning journey, I believed that there really was a perfect yarn. And I remember sitting, thinking about these things and thinking about my yarns and looking at them and looking at other people online who are spinning yarn and thinking like, I want my yarn to look like their yarn. It looks like commercial yarn. It felt like that was the magnum opus or the, holy grail of yarn, was to have somebody look at my yarn and say, wow, that looks like commercial yarn. That's how good it is. And in developing control and predictability and replication, that meant that I had the skill and to be able to do that. And I think that's a really normal place to be when you're first coming to hand spinning. For me, when I came to hand spinning, I really thought that I was going to save money. I laugh at myself about it now, but it's not actually funny. I could see that the yarns that I wanted to work with were increasing in price, and the idea of sort of being able to manipulate every stage of the process and create the yarns that I really wanted to work with was to look at those commercial yarns, to see their reproducibility, which of course is because they're being made in a mill and on a machine, that if I could get there and I could do that, then therefore I'd made it. I'm not even sure now what I really thought that meant. So I tried to sort of engineer all these outcomes. I through like the fibers that I worked with, so all the choices that I was making, learning about like all the technical side of spinning, all the ratios, how your whirls work, trying different spinning wheels, going through the journey of buying and selling things and figuring out how all these tools kind of work together and what I could create on these different tools, whether it was a different type of wheel, a spindle, etc., etc. Playing with different preps, getting a drum carder, getting wool combs, getting a hackle, all that kind of stuff. And then also playing around with different types of twists. So lots of things over the years around, playing with high twist singles, low twist ply, high twist ply, low twist singles, all those different things around like twist. The more you manipulate all those different areas, the more you learn, and it becomes a part of your spinning repertoire. It becomes a part of sort of the conversation that you're having with your yarn and with the yarns that you're hoping to create, right? And the subtle pressure that this created on myself was really, it's very quiet. And it was sort of this constant feeling, particularly at the beginning, of sort of this general sense of dissatisfaction, that it's not really what I wanted to create. These yarns weren't really what I was looking for. Every yarn didn't feel like it was good enough. So that self-criticism piece, right? And then that constant comparison, looking at social media, thinking my yarns don't look like that. Why don't they look like that? And those early days of when you're learning and when you're, at your wheel and you're putting in a lot of time, there's really nothing to replace that, right? Little side quest here. A lot of people ask me how you get to that point where you're spinning the yarns that you want to spin and you want to create. And the reality is it's time. It's time spent at the wheel. I spend an incredible amount of time spinning yarn. I just do. And I think when people hear that, sometimes it's not really what we want to hear, right? Sometimes it's sort of like, well, there's that whole debate in sport around talent versus practice, right? And to get to that point where I realized that I needed to stop being so dissatisfied with some of the yarns that I was making, not all of them, but a gross majority of them. I realized that there was this practice that needed to happen, that this intentional kind of sitting at the wheel. And perfection sort of becomes this moving target, because as you improve in one area, there's other areas that start to become apparent that it's not that they're not good enough or that, you aren't doing things quite, sort of quite optimally. I don't know what other word to use there, but you start to realize that the different aspects and the different areas of creating yarn, they all play their role. You can't make, I wasn't able to create the yarns that I wanted to create without superior prep, but I couldn't get superior prep with poor quality fiber, and whether it was wool or otherwise. And so all of these like pieces of sort of what that perfect yarn looks like, it becomes this moving target of, oh, hang on a second, to get that I need to do X, Y, and Z. To get that I need to do A, B, and C, and so on. And it becomes kind of this moving target of like, what is it that we're really trying to create here, and what is the perfect yarn? There was a point where I remember it actually quite profoundly. There was a point where I realized that the yarn was never the problem. I realized that the yarn itself was perfect in its own way because it served a purpose, or it served a function, or I knit it up into something, and it was like, I can't see all the, little inconsistencies in it. Like, what was I criticizing myself for? And there was kind of this moment. I had already started filming the podcast, and I'd already started putting videos up on YouTube, and I was starting to sort of meet other people that were on this journey as well. And I remember a few people that joined the community right around that time before we started on Patreon. I remember there was this point where there was a few people that were starting to join the community that were very obviously more experienced spinners than me. And I remember feeling like, oh, hang on a second, some of what they're talking about and some of what they're saying really resonates with me. And like, I really heard what they were trying to say, which was, that this idea of practice and creating a daily practice, creating intentionality around our practice as of being spinners versus chasing this, sort of outcome. And the more energy that I was spending chasing that outcome, being very product driven, wanting to create that perfect yarn, wanting to recreate those commercial yarns that I was seeing on the market that I wanted to emanate. I really sort of realized that, like, wow, this takes a lot of energy to sort of approach your craft like this, whether it's, pottery or woodworking or metalwork. It doesn't even matter. It doesn't matter what the craft is. If you're always outcomes driven and you're forcing those perfect outcomes, that's a lot of energy, and it's a lot of time and energy spent in self-criticism and being dissatisfied by what you're making. I'll never forget the moment when Felicia Lowe, on her Taking Back Fridays vlog that she does through as part of Sweet Georgia, she talked about this story. And I don't know exactly where it came from, but it was this idea of the potter who's trying to create the perfect pot. And there was this idea that there was the one person who spent their whole life studying to create the perfect pot. And there was this other maker who just kept making pots and just went through the process again and again and again and again and created many pots over the course of their career. And, the idea was that, we learn by doing, we learn by being immersed in the process, right? And that really cracked that belief for me that when I was sort of forcing those outcomes and forcing that end product, I really kind of all of a sudden kind of had this aha moment of like, I need to just make yarn. I need to embrace the process. And it wasn't that I didn't love the process. I did. I wouldn't have kept going with it if I hadn't. But shifting my energy was where things really started to change and really started to turn. And I also, when I look back at old podcast episodes and whatnot, that's when my energy started to shift, and some of the things that we were talking about on the podcast started to shift. And it was very subtle. I can see it now just because it's my journey. And I can see that self-reflection that started, and that sort of, processing of like, what is it that I'm really looking for here? What is it that I'm really trying to create? So I have notes. That's why I keep looking over, because otherwise I'll get completely off track. So over time, and I would say probably over the last 5 to 7 years, I've really noticed that this has really shaped the types of yarns that I make and the type of projects that I engage in, and the what I want to pursue, like the things that I choose, or like when I'm looking at my stash, it's like what do I feel like what am I looking for, what do I need more of in my life right now, do I want to do a bunch of drum carding? I do tend to card a lot because I really love carded prep, so I'm always in the mood for like a light, airy, lofty yarn that I can sort of spin in a short draw fashion that gives me sort of that semi-woolen, semi-worsted kind of airy yarn. But then when I look at my stash, it's sort of, starting to let the fiber lead me more often. Shifting from what should this be to what is this becoming? What am I looking for? What's the feel that I'm looking for? What are the things that I want more of? I remember with the Rideau Arcot Charolais spin that I did, this was when I really started to realize that like something was shifting in my making. That was quite a long-term project. And when you think of it over the years, it wasn't that long-term, but over the course of a year, it took up a significant chunk of the year that I spun that. I think it was 2024, or was it 2023? I think I might have spun that in 2023. Anyhow, it was a part of a fleece that I had shared with some other friends of mine. And it was such a weirdo, like for lack of a better term, it was kind of one of those fleeces that like I could have spun it true worsted, I could have spun it true woolen. It was very dynamic, and as I was lock popping it and prepping it, it needed to be rewashed. So it was like just allowing the fleece to kind of take me and pull me where it needed me to go. And then as I continued on with the process and as I continued with the spinning, it almost kind of spun itself, and there was no major decisions needed to be made around whether it was going to be like a 2-ply or a multiply. And it ended up being a 3-ply because it just needed to be a 3-ply. And in that process, and actually I haven't started knitting with that yarn yet, but I actually might end up weaving with it. I was looking at it the other night and I was like, I wonder. I'm going to do a little bit of sampling. In that process, my spinning overall just became more relaxed. It became more alive. It felt like more of a conversation. It felt like, and I think, it might sound a bit corny, but that's sort of this journey that I've been on. Right now I'm processing this Romney. It's been really slow, partially because we're not in our own home right now. We're living with my mom right now. And I just don't have that like fiber prep space available to me right now. It's also the winter. It's a little bit more difficult to do fiber prep. I really like lock popping and doing some of that stuff outside. But as I'm working through that fleece, it's really good quality. I washed it as soon as I got it. It's got a lot of bounce and sproing to it. The crimp, the curling sort of Romney crimp, that long wool crimp, is just perfect. It just feels alive. It feels fresh. It feels like it's ready to become yarn. But I'm enjoying the fiber prep process. I'm not at that point where I can start spinning yet, and that's okay. Allowing it to just unfold and allowing it to be where it is something that I think before, when I was a newer spinner, I would rail against. I would sort of almost resist. And now it's like, no, it just is where it is. Is it as far along as I would like it to be? No, and that's okay. Giving myself permission for that to be okay. When we talk about the perfect yarn, or we talk about creating that perfect yarn, I think more and more, I think I'm recognizing that it's a story that we tell ourselves about control. It's sort of this idea that we have complete control over every single aspect of the process and every single area of the practice. And I think sometimes the satisfaction in our spinning and the joy, the contentment that we feel when we have an opportunity to sit at our spindles or sit at our wheels. Look at Spindle Bingo right now, that's going on Instagram. Recognize that we start to see more and more that there's a relationship there. There's a relationship between us and our tools. There's a relationship between us and the other hand spinners in our community and the wider conversation that's going on, whether it be about tools and helping to navigate the world of raw fleece for newer spinners who haven't done that yet, being able to exchange fiber and prep and talk about what's out there and what's available and what you might want to do with that, and sort of this whole world starts to open up, and it really is all about existing in relationship with our yarns, and relationship with the fibers that we're working with, the shepherds who grow the fleeces, who look after their sheep and their animals, if we're spinning other fibers, plant-based fibers and where they're coming from, the environmental impact. It's really not about the yarn. It's not about that finished skein, and we can be really excited about that finished skein and be really proud of ourselves. I think that's wonderful, but it doesn't end there. And in some ways it almost becomes a byproduct of the whole thing. So over the last 10 or 15 years, I think I've really learned that letting go has made my work better. It's certainly not made it worse, that's for sure. And the reason for that is all of these things. It's being in relationship, it's having conversations, it's learning about the process, digging into areas of the process that I maybe resisted previously. When I was a newer spinner, just going back a minute, one of the things that I found really overwhelming was fiber prep. And it felt like this whole other thing, kind of like dyeing can sometimes feel. It's like, well, why do we have to be spinners and dyers? Why can't we just be spinners? Why do I have to be a knitter and a spinner? I felt like that with fiber prep. Why do I have to be a spinner and a fiber prep artist? But the reality is that as I've learned to embrace these different aspects of our creativity and these different aspects of our making, it's made my yarns better. It just has. So rather than trying to create the perfect yarn, it's become more about creating the yarn that I'm excited to use, and the yarns that that I want to go to, that I would prefer to work with over buying commercial yarn. And that's not because commercial yarn doesn't still have its place, because it absolutely does. But I think for myself, because I want to work the majority of the time with my hand spun and reflect on the types of fabrics that I can create with my hand spun, my magnum opus would be creating a weaving set chart with all of my different hand spun yarns that I sort of make by default. It just makes our work even better, and it makes our yarns better, it makes our fabrics better. And as I look to the future, these are all the different little areas that I'm excited to perfect and to dig into, and that's why it's a moving target. That's why there is no specific outcome. That's why there is no specific, oh, you've arrived. There's no sign of like, you're here, you accomplished X, Y, and Z. It's more, the ruler keeps moving, and the target keeps moving, and what we want to create in our yarns and what we want to look for and what we are looking for is constantly moving and changing. It's a really wonderful experience, and it's a wonderful place to be. And we sort of have to go through. We can't go around, we can't go over, we can't go under. We literally have to go through. If this kind of reflection resonates with you, and if this is the kind of conversation that you want to continue to have, this is what we do in our Patreon community. We would love to have you in the woolen spinning community, and I would love to get to know you better. I would love to hear about where you are on your journey with your hand spinning, and what you're thinking about, and how you're engaging in your daily practice of making yarn. And I will see you next month. Bye, everyone.